and its inability to pay 53 million rand, or rather million US dollars of its debt. Also focusing on the latest trends in agriculture. This and more coming up on Africa in Business this afternoon. Here's an invitation for you to interact with us on our social media platforms. On X, Instagram and YouTube, you'll find us at Channel Africa 1. On Facebook, you'll find us at Channel Africa. If you have any stories you'd like to share that you believe would be of interest to our listeners, both on the African continent and in the diaspora, do send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za.
Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
We begin here this afternoon with Africa's premier tourism showcase, Africa's Travel Indaba. That's officially underway in Durban, South Africa. The 3-day trade show is preceded by the Business Opportunity Networking Day, better known as Bond Day. It's a space for knowledge exchange, thought leadership, and setting the tone for deals to be made on the trade floor. Our reporter, Lebogang Mabange, has more from the Inkosi Albert Luthuli International Convention Center.
From discovery to connection and growth, the Bond Day has returned with a powerful message and renewed energy. Industry leaders, tourism professionals and stakeholders gathered in Durban to explore the future of African tourism. The Chief Executive Officer of South African Tourism, Nombulelo Guliwe, opened the day by emphasizing the importance of knowledge sharing and global collaboration.
Today is about travel and tourism knowledge sharing. You know, nothing is as powerful as information, as engaging and sharing experiences. So I hope we'll use the next couple of hours to do just that. You'll also hear, as Carol said, global best practices, learn from global tourism trailblazers and explore innovations transforming the tourism global landscape.
The Bond Day is not just a precursor to the trade exhibition, it is a strategic platform where conversations ignite ideas. Dr. Gregory Davids, chairperson of the South African Tourism Board, described Bond Day as a collaborative space that goes beyond professionals, one that inspires vision.
We come together at Bond Day not only as professionals, but as visionaries and thought leaders to shape the next chapter of the African tourism. Bond Day is our shared space. It is an opportunity for reflection, for knowledge sharing, and the co-creation of knowledge. This 3 days, and particularly today, is quite important.
Dr. Davids also reminded delegates that Africa's Travel Indaba is more than just an industry gathering, it's a force for transformation.
It is this interaction, in my view, of public and private, local and global, that gives Indaba the credibility to influence, inspire and impact on the tourism ecosystem locally and abroad. Africa Travel Indaba is much, much more than only an exhibition. It's a catalyst. This is where trade meets transformation.
Among the inspiring voices on the Bond Day stage was Africa's first female dredge master, Captain Londiwe Ngobo, who urged delegates to connect with their business purpose before showcasing it to the world.
We've been told that we're here to discover, to connect, and to grow. And if we're here to discover, I hope that before you even represent your company, you remember these two questions. Before others can discover your business, have you truly discovered it? Have you truly? Because I'll be speaking to you, not the walls, as we connect. What is the heartbeat of your offering? And does it still align with why you started?
As the tourism industry rebuilds and adapts post-COVID, the Bond Day sets the tone for the deals, partnerships and innovations expected over the next 3 days. From here, it's all about showcasing Africa's diversity and tourism potential to the global market. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in the KwaZulu-Natal province of South Africa.
It's gone exactly 12 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time as we turn our focus now to the United States and China. They have agreed to temporarily cut reciprocal tariffs in a deal seeking to end a damaging trade war between the world's two biggest economies. The U.S. will cut extra tariffs imposed on Chinese imports in April to 30% from 145%. And Chinese duties on U.S. imports will fall to 10% from 125%. These new measures will be in place for 90 days. U.S. and Chinese officials met over the weekend in Geneva, Switzerland. And to unpack this further for us, we joined this afternoon by Dr. Emmanuel Matambo, a senior researcher at the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg in South Africa. Dr. Matambo, good to have you with us. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Good afternoon, Thami. Good afternoon to your listeners, and thank you for the kind invitation.
Considering the fact, Doctor, that these new measures will be in place only for a period of 90 days, does this move signal that the US and China have actually found a middle ground regarding their relations? Can the world breathe a little bit easier now?
Observers are really on tenterhooks still, despite this relief, which will kick in on the 14th of May. And people are kind of still concerned because of just how arbitrarily the tariffs were imposed in the first place, because no one really seemed to know what was urging President Donald Trump to act in such a manner, especially if you look at how punitive he was towards allies of the United States, traditional allies, that is such as the European Union, Canada, and Mexico. And that is why, despite this relief, a lot of people are not really sure whether or not after 90 days there will be a reversion to what has been happening. So this is just because of just erratically the tariffs were imposed in the first place. So there is optimism in the meantime, but in the long run, we'll just have to see, because no one can really predict what Trump will come up with.
Earlier on, we did see Trump focusing largely on the automotive industry, also focusing on technology as the two industries that perhaps he felt would be worst affected by the trade war. But looking at it now, which are the industries in the United States and China as well that are likely to benefit the most from these tariff cuts?
I think the automotive industry will have to benefit a lot as well. And we have to look at even the retail industry itself. We have companies such as Walmart and companies such as Target in the United States, because at the end of the day, because of Trump's populist temperament, he wants to get the support of ordinary Americans. And those are the people mostly going to be adversely affected by these tariffs, because at the end of the day, he doesn't want, with the midterms coming up next year, the last thing he needs is America to have these shelves that are emptied of goods, such as the time it was when people were panic buying during the COVID-19. That would be an embarrassment on him personally. So these are the industries that are likely to benefit the most. The issue of fentanyl, which is really a negligible issue that Trump highlighted on the part of China, the tariffs on fentanyl will still remain. But those are only of marginal importance compared to the tariffs on auto vehicle parts, compared to the tariffs on even the things such as personal care, and obviously the exports by companies such as Target and Walmart.
And focusing on the African continent, which sectors are most likely to be impacted by the shift in global trade dynamics as far as Africa is concerned?
When you look at the African continent, you have to look at it even from a broader perspective, just beyond these tariffs, such as with the countries that benefited from the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, those will be adversely affected across the board. And then you look at countries such as South Africa, for example, whose exports to the United States are car parts. You can talk about issues such as such as fruit, for example, and things that are coming from the manufacturing, from the agricultural industry, those will be adversely affected. But we also have to question ourselves against Africa. How do we bolster our trade with alternative partners such as India, such as China, for example? I think that if there's anything that is instructive on what Trump has done this year, it is that as Africa we need to question ourselves against the erratic and fickle nature of global trade lines, and we have to probably look at alternatives when things such as these are happening. So countries that depend on trade volumes that are considerably sent to the United States will be adversely more affected than African countries that have alternative sources for their exports.
And this really, Doctor, did come to the forefront when this trade war began. And I wonder, could this agreement shift Chinese or investment priorities away from Africa toward their bilateral trade? Because at the beginning of this, China was in the basket with all the other countries and worse so. But now that America and China seem to be finding themselves and finding each other, could this have an adverse impact on Africa, and more than what it is having now?
It is really difficult to tell, Thami, for two reasons. The first reason is just what I mentioned. No one really knows what Trump is going to decide at the end of the day. So can China put its baskets in, can it put its eggs in one basket, which is the United States? Well, that might actually backfire if after the 90-day reprieve, Donald Trump changes his mind and then imposes those tariffs again on China. So I think China would better be served at the moment not to completely turn away from Africa. Another issue is just the issue of international diplomacy itself. China still wants to be seen as the most stable partner of the two largest global economies. That is why you saw President Xi Jinping had to go to Vietnam, Malaysia, and Cambodia. These are countries that have been traditionally concerned about Chinese exports to their specific countries. China has also been extending overtures to the European Union. So if it wants to be counted as a reliable partner of Africa and countries of the global south, then yes, it will be counseled against. It will be better advised not to completely turn away from the African continent.
Is this an indicator, Doctor, that there are opportunities to negotiate better trade or investment terms with America specifically for Africa?
That will obviously depend on what alternatives does Africa have, and then what leverage does it have in those particular alternatives. The moment Africa shows the fact that it has alternatives, it has choices such as China, and it can use those alternatives to engineer African growth, then yes, we'll see that we might have a bargaining chip. But at the end of the day, though, Thami, you have to, when we talk about Donald Trump today and the United States under his leadership, we have to look at Donald Trump himself as a person, because I think he sees the presidency almost from a personal view. And we know that he has a very derogatory appreciation of the African continent. In the first Trump presidency from 2017 to 2021, not even once did he step on the African continent apart from sending his wife to Kenya. And we have seen that even in his second coming as president, he has been very draconian on countries such as South Africa. He has been accusing the Congo of sending thugs to the United States. So this is a president whose idea of Africa has been pejorative from the word go.
What do you make of this huge slash in tariffs? I mean, going from 125% to 10%, and then from 145 to 30%. What do you make of that? It's such a huge jump.
It is a very huge chunk. So those numbers there are because they agreed upon reducing their respective tariffs by 115 percentage points. What we have to make of this is that Trump wants to save face, and knowing President Trump is going to try to sell this as a victory of some sort. It is not. At best, this is a technical withdrawal. tactical withdrawal. At worst, it is actually capitulation, because if you read the statement that came from Geneva after this agreement was signed, they actually spoke about each other as being beneficial economic and trade partners. Now, that is a very big far cry from what President Trump said during his Liberation Day speech on the 2nd of April, when he said for a long time people have looted, pillaged, and raped the United States of America. So what has caused this is the fact that he is very much concerned about his numbers, polling numbers, which are plummeting in the United States. So it is actually a very big victory for China, because even 2 weeks ago, when President Trump was saying the Chinese want to talk to me, they're desperate to make a deal with me, all that was actually rebutted by the Chinese people. They said, provide evidence that we have been reaching out to you. So this is actually the United States coming to the table, because they have probably realized that in as much as punishing China was a very good crutch to lean on to win an election, it is very bad economics once you are in office.
Certainly is the politics of business. Dr. Emmanuel Matombo, thank you very much for your insight this afternoon. Very much appreciated, Dr. Matombo. He is a senior researcher at the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg in South Africa. He takes us to exactly 23 minutes after 4 p.m.
The Midnight Snack, 12 to 3 a.m.
Interracial relationships. And now you are based in the States and you are married to a beautiful white woman, white lady.
I learned that, for us in our culture, we literally can speak our mind. I remember when we started dating and whatnot, and, she picked up like a little bit of weight. And me, I was like, oh, wow, you must be happy in this relationship because look at you. You look great. You're even picking up some weight. And she got really, really offended. And it took I think it was about a couple of hours before I could realize that, because I could tell that she was off after that. And it took me a while to figure out what it was. Until later when I was talking to her, I'm like, you're really, really off today. And then she expressed that, yeah, because you're telling me that I'm picking on some weight. And I'm like, in my culture, when you are gaining some weight, it means you're happy. Yes. So that's what I was trying to imply.
The Midnight Snack, every Monday, 12 to 3 a.m. with Chanduko Ligege. Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
Now, the government of Mozambique has failed to repay $53 million of its external debt for the 2024-2025 financial year. According to the country's annual report on the public debt that was tabled in the Mozambican parliament, the instability that gripped the country following protests at the alleged fraudulent results of the October general elections was the reason for the country's inability to honour its debt repayments. For more on this, we joined on the line by political economist Helio Gilish. A very good afternoon to you, Helio. Good to have you with us.
Hi, good afternoon, and thanks for inviting me.
So, how has the failure to repay the external debt affected Mozambique's credit rating as well as its access to international financial markets? Has it been debilitating for them, or is it too soon to tell?
Well, it has affected the country greatly because, as we know, Mozambique is coming off a back of scandal involving hidden debts totaling more than $2 billion, which put the financial institutions on notice. And after willing to pay for this damage caused, the economy and financial system were connected as this affected the country's ability to negotiate debt, above all affected the transparency and international trust. So the latest happenings, political and social instability, also affected that. And I have to remind that only last week, the economic and social program and budget for the current year was approved. So it means that the country were running without a budget approval. Only that last week we had it approved by the parliament.
And you've mentioned political instability and the role that it has played in the current debt crisis that the country is experiencing. What about issues of mismanagement and corruption? How much of an impact have they had?
Definitely, mismanagement and corruption are the top priority and the major things that we can point out as a government performance. So when we look on the international markets, they are very sensitive to financial scandals, to defaulting countries, and easily fall into disrupt when they do not fulfill the requirements. So the successive scandals that Mozambique has experienced and the economic contraction that the country has been experiencing have put the country in a dedicated and equally high-risk situation. In other words, I would say that doing business with Mozambique is already a high-risk factor. So government must adopt a very clear, transparent measures and also responsibility in the sense that they can go back to the markets with some trust and access to the international funding.
This is largely around a Treasury's deficit. How much of an impact has the freezing of support for the state budget by international partners? How much has that contributed to the current situation?
It impacts. As we can see, Mozambique is largely known as a country that imports more than exports. So the balance of payments can be largely affected on this way, in the sense that we are, as a country, we are willing to export more revenues, to export more foreign currency, rather than attract international currency for our economy. So when we are not able to do that, to perform economically well, it means that we will be always recurring to internal debt, sometimes to external debt. And the country, year after year, will be feeling the consequence of this high-risk debt factor, as well as the corruption that is marked the relationship between Mozambican market and international markets.
I'd like us to talk about the press club, or rather the Paris Club lenders. We understand that debt arrears worsened when the debt to creditors was not covered by the terms that Mozambique negotiated with the Paris Club, and that wasn't considered. Is Mozambique then perhaps at risk of falling into a debt trap, especially with continued borrowing from the likes of China or other non-Paris Club lenders?
Yes, definitely yes. I have to agree with you. And in fact, the country situation is worrying, since in addition to the debt scandal, in addition to the debt with the main creditors from the Paris Club, the country has been granting part of these main investments, such as infrastructure, to countries such as China. And in the end of the day, the type of debt has changed, but the effects remain the same and even worse. So we are just changing the players, but the way of playing is still the same, and the situation of the country will become even worse. So we changed it from Paris Club and we put another actor, which is, for example, Russia or China, but the indebtedness of the country is still high. And we, as a country, as a people, will still paying a lot of money to that.
Thank you very much for that insight, Julio Ogile. She's a political analyst. Thank you very much, or rather political economist. Thank you for giving us an idea of just the economics of Mozambique. And worth noting as well that the country's public debt increased by 26.2%. That's in the 5-year period closing 2024 at a record $16.238 billion. It is exactly 4:30 p.m. Central African time. Let's head over now to the markets desk, where Chanduko Ligege is standing by with your latest market indicators.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Thami. Good afternoon. $1 is trading at 18.16 in South Africa. In Botswana, 13.46. Namibia, 18 Nambian 16. The Zambian kwacha, 27 kwacha 3 to the US dollar. In Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shillings 707. Ethiopia, 133 bih 394. Uganda 3,000 shillings 639, Tanzania 2,000 shillings 696. $1 in Nigeria is 1,000 naira 606. In Egypt, the dollar is at 50 Egyptian pound 60. Tunisia 3 dinar 1. Algeria 132 dinar 8. In Morocco, the dollar will cost you 9 dirham 09. In Angola, the dollar is at 912 kwanza, while the Congolese franc is 2,855 to the US dollar. $1 is trading at 75 pence to the British pound and 88 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is $3,217, platinum at $980 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $66.32 a barrel. That is all. For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
And I tell you what, sport means business today. You should see Miss Musibudi Makura. She's standing by with the latest from the business of sport.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Thami. We'll start with the story. So South African relay teams really did well yesterday out in China in Guangzhou. That was the World Relay Championships that took place over the weekend. And it was Team South Africa that secured 2 gold medals. The first one was in the men 4x100 meter relay team, a gold medal in a world-leading time of 37.61 seconds. There was also more success in the men's 4x400 meter relay team, where they also stormed to a gold medal. That was also in a world-leading time of about 2 minutes, 57.50 seconds. The women's team in the 4x400 meter relay team also managing a podium finish, finishing in third in a time of 3 minutes, 24.84 seconds. World Athletics also releasing the breakdown of the prize money for the winners. The winners walking away with about $40,000, the runner-ups with $20,000, while the third place finishers walking away with $10,000. So let's speak now to SABC Sport Athletics journalist Charles Baloyi, who's on the line to help us break it down for us. How much money is the team receiving? Will this money be equally distributed amongst the athletes, or how much money then goes to the federation? Charles, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for your time. There was a lot of money at stake here at the World Relay Championships. Not a bad payday for athletes running in a space of 2 days.
Good afternoon, Rachel. Good afternoon to the listeners. Once again, thank you for having me on the show. It's a pleasure. This is not just about the money. Let's not prioritize the money. What is important is that all our 4 teams have qualified for the World Senior Championships in Tokyo, Japan in September. That's the most important thing. Because when they held all these training camps, the last one at UJ, the first one at TAX, the mandate was for all the teams to qualify. So Athletics South Africa managed to take all those 4 teams there. So now comes to the bonus part, which is the money, the 700,000, the $40,000 US. So according to the rules of World Athletics, remember World Athletics is the world governing body, so they deal with the federations. So individuals don't get paid out unless it's individual events. So they will take this $40,000 and transfer it into the coffers of Athletics South Africa, led by James Molloy and his board. So what will then happen is the board will sit down and decide how they pay the athletes. So the fact that Akani Zimbini was the last one to finish off the race, or Walaza starting, it doesn't necessarily mean they'll get more money more than the others. So the federation will decide, because this is purely for the team. They will usually get a fair share of the money. Let's not forget, for example, in the relay 4x1, there were also 2 athletes, Ritsibisito Malinga and Matoso, who didn't run but were part of the team, who traveled to China, to Guangzhou, who were part of the relay camps. I was saying they are not going to get 0 cents because they didn't contribute. They were reserves. and the equally part of the team, cheering them on the sidelines, and also sailing with them, dining with them, so sharing the hotel with them. So it's a team spirit. So they're going to get the money equally. So the bronze ones will not get the same ones as the gold ones. That's the difference. But it's up to the federation to tell the distribution to the individuals.
Yeah, it's up to the federation to absolutely make sure that that money is distributed equally amongst the athletes. Charles, is there a participation fee in this case where the athletes would have gotten are likely to get a participation fee for participating in the World Championships? How does it work, this competition?
Yes, the participation fee doesn't belong to the athletes. It belongs to the federation, because this is a world championship which caters teams only, national teams. Whereas later there will be the individuals who will be competing in Tokyo, Japan, in the 100 and 200. That's why you find others are doubling, others are tripling, others are doing 4 events to accommodate the relay. So the federations get monthly grants. This is the same as football giving FIFA giving SAFA money to sustain the federations. And when they go to the World Cup, there will be participation fee, or called appearance fee, for all the teams that qualify for a major tournament. So what happens now is Athletics South Africa is in a healthy financial position, because the money which federations are given is to prepare these teams that will be now preparing for the main World Championships. Let's remember, we have to separate this from the Olympics. This is not an Olympic year, it's a World Championship year in athletics. So World Athletics is responsible for all those 60 teams that have qualified. And when we say 60 teams, it's not necessarily 60 countries. We are counting the mixed relay, 4x4, 4x1, those things. So all the teams that qualify from Guangzhou is 60. So they received, the federations received participation fee, they received prize money, those who made it. And the team, by the way, is coming back tomorrow in the afternoon at 4 p.m. where there will be a celebration. Euros welcome at the OR Tambo International Airport.
Listen, I trust that you will be there, the OR Tambo, welcoming the team, of course, following a great performance over the weekend. A final one as we wrap up this conversation. We speak about the athletes getting money. What do their coaches get? In this case, Paul Gorey is obviously the relay team coach. Does he get a share of that money as well?
Paul Gorey didn't travel with the team because of personal problems. So the assistant coach, Coach T, Thami was part of the coach. Yes, he's going to get money as part of being the technical team alongside the team manager.
Charles Baloyi, thank you so much for your time this afternoon on Channel Africa. Charles Baloyi is a SABC Sport leading athletics journalist, speaking to us, of course, about the payday of Team South African athletes following their participation at the World Relays Championships out in China over the weekend, returning home with $40,000. That is both the men as well as the 4x100 meter relay team, as well as the 4x4 400 meter relay team, having won gold and walking away with $40,000, while the women's 4x400 meter relay team will only walk away with about $10,000. It's a wrap from the sports desk at the Sawa. Thami, it's back to you.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
It is exactly 20 minutes to 5 p.m. Central African time. We bring you back to South Africa now, where South African President Cyril Ramaphosa says the African Continental Free Trade Area is a key economic driver for growth on the African continent. Ramaphosa was speaking at the Africa CEO Forum 2025, which is currently underway in Côte d'Ivoire in Abidjan. Heads of state, CEOs of leading African and global companies, visionary entrepreneurs, investors and change makers from across the continent and beyond have converged at the summit. Ramaphosa says the AFCFTA is a fundamentally transformative effort which enables the continent's economic growth and integration.
Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development. Stay Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
We'll get back to that story in just a moment. For now, let's turn our focus to the latest as far as the agricultural trends are concerned. Agri Trends, Global Forces Reshape SA's farming future, has found that farmers need to adapt to increased volatility due to shifting global dynamics influencing the agricultural sector. The report highlights that the US's erratic tariffs and its shifting policies could see South African agriculture facing an uncertain future. The Agri-Trends report further adds that the agricultural sector's continued resilience depends on the ability to navigate these complexities, such as climate variability, animal diseases, and volatility in food value chains. For more on this, we joined on the line by Dr. Marlene Lowe, who's a senior economist at ABSA Agribusiness. A very good afternoon to you, Dr. Marlene. Thank you very much for joining us on Africa in Business today.
Thanks for having me, Thami. It's wonderful to be here.
So what would you highlight as the key global trends identified in the ABSA Agri-Trends report? And these are specifically the type of trends that are reshaping South African agriculture.
Thami, I think you correctly pointed out a lot of them, like the animal disease issues and climate variability. But what is definitely top of mind, and we've seen that again today, is the geopolitical landscape and how American trade policy are shaping the trade rhythm in the world and the opportunities and risks associated with that.
And how are geopolitical tensions and shifting trade relations and specifically around the United States and China impacting South Africa's agricultural imports or exports rather?
So I think it disrupts the traditional rhythm that we've seen in global trade. So where free trade was the norm, this is not the case anymore in 2025. And this holds risks and opportunities. So specifically for China, the disruptions between trade or trade between the US and China rather, present some opportunities for South Africa, specifically for our grains and oilseed sector. I think we've seen from the trade war in 2018 that there was a definite shift to Southern Hemisphere export destinations, so where China actually relied on Brazil and other Southern American destinations for commodities like soybeans. South Africa wasn't positioned correctly at that time, but since we've signed a protocol with China, and so potentially now with the disruption of trade yet again between China and the US, we could see South Africa capitalizing on some of these opportunities. So it's not just all doom and gloom. I think we've all reeled from the shock of the 2nd of April. But definitely the disruption also presents opportunities for countries and companies that can be agile and respond to the different circumstances.
Dr. Marlene, this really has been the rhetoric specifically for Africa, that this trade war and the trade tensions have really highlighted the importance of having alternate trade partners and being cushioned and not being overly reliant on the United States. But I wonder, from the agricultural sector perspective, has this put you in a position where you now have to rethink your financial approaches to financing the agricultural sector and perhaps even strategies that need to be put in place moving forward?
Yeah, so look, I think that if you evaluate just in terms of the global trade disruptions, we see that every week or every 2 weeks there's a change in the storyline. And so it's really very difficult to take a long-term perspective. But what we've seen from disruptions in the agricultural sector, specifically relating to climate or even to the logistical system that we've seen with problems at Transnet, the sector is extremely extremely resilient. And so we are quite confident about doing business in agriculture. And as yet, we have not changed any strategies around being a major financier within this sector.
And how much have climate-related dynamics and factors actually influenced the type of strategies that you have in place? Because environmental change and climate change has also been quite a huge determinant and factor in the variables affecting agribusiness.
Yes, 100%. So I think consumers would also have felt the impacts of a very volatile climate. If you think of something like maize meal, that is really still at the very high prices that we've seen that started last year as a result of the very severe El Nino. I think what puts South African agriculture in a very good position is that when the world experiences an El Nino, we typically have a shortage of grain commodities and oilseed commodities, but this is then countered by a higher price because of that shortage. And so all in all, the revenue to agricultural producers can still be relatively robust. And so this natural hedge provides us comfort in financing within this sector.
Dr. Marlene Lowe, Senior Economist at Absa Agribusiness, we thank you very much for your insight and your contribution this afternoon.
100%. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. That's Dr. Marlene Lowe giving us some insights there that have come up the Absa Agri Trends. It's exactly 4:48 Central African Time.
Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
We take you now to Côte d'Ivoire in Abidjan, where South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has been speaking at and attending the Africa CEO Forum 2025. He has been commenting on the pivotal role that the Africa Continental Free Trade Area plays.
You know, as I walked in with President Ouattara, President Kagame and others, as I entered this room, I could smell money. And I welcome this opportunity to sit here and look at people who have money or control money. And as I look at all of you and I say, wow, these are people who control a lot of money on the continent.
Right.
And I want them to smell the coffee and go beyond their 17% skepticism, because the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is a fundamentally transformative mechanism that was adopted by the leaders of the continent. And we should recognize and applaud the fact that the political leaders under the aegis of the AU saw wisdom, and led by President Issoufou, and President Kagame was leading the reform process, they saw wisdom in scaling the fortunes of Africa up and moving us just beyond just talking about politics and the unity of the continent, and wanting to put in place the real building blocks of what will support that unity and the progress on our continent. And that was about the economic growth of the continent through engendering trade, and that's why the African Continental Free Trade Area was adopted. So it is an engine of growth, and through it we'd like the private sector to embrace it, to participate in it, because what it does, it gives the African continent an opportunity to integrate. And it gives business people the opportunity to see the 1.4 billion people market on our continent and a GDP of the entire continent adding up to $3.4 trillion. Now, with this agreement, we're then able to get the private sector working with the public sector to embark on meaningful projects such as infrastructure, because for trade to have meaning and to happen on our continent, infrastructure projects must be embarked upon, roads must be built, our airlines must work properly, our ports must work properly, our rail network must work properly. And this is where the private sector can then come and partner with the public sector, where we can work together. And the public sector is keen, having established or inaugurated the African Continental Free Trade Area, in integrating the continent. I saw the integration of the continent during COVID-19.
That's South African President Cyril Ramaphosa speaking at the CEO Forum 2025, which is currently underway in Côte d'Ivoire, Abidjan.
From markets to innovation. From markets to innovation. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni covers it all. With Africa's future in focus, Channel Africa, the African perspective.
And talking about markets, joining us this afternoon is SABC Economics Editor Tshepo Mongai as we take a look at what we can expect in the coming week in the business sector. A very good afternoon to you, Tshepo. Good to have you with us once again. Happy Monday.
Good afternoon, Thami, and to your listeners.
We've been focusing, Tshepo, quite a lot on the US-China agreement and trade negotiations and what impact that is likely to have on both the countries and the trading environment. But I wonder how the markets have reacted to the latest regarding the United States and China, that it does look like they seem to be finding each other somewhat. How have the markets reacted to that?
Well, it looks like the markets have actually been desperate for any news that could actually help them to, go higher. And what we have seen, indeed, it's exactly that. It started with a rally on Wall Street on Friday, up almost 1% in anticipation of that particular meeting in Geneva, Switzerland. And of course, that momentum continued to build up into Asia trade Monday morning, where we've seen across the board the Shanghai Composite, the Hang Seng, also we've seen the Nikkei all up quite with a big numbers, almost 1%. So you could see there was this huge relief rally that is coming through. And we've also seen the US dollar gaining further speed there against other currencies. But what's also been good is that we've seen a number of other emerging currencies like the South African rand also getting stronger. One would have thought that perhaps a stronger rand would have translated into a weaker currency, but that has not been the case. And of course, on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, we've also seen that strength with a number of sectors, your industrials, your banking, showing some gains there, except just some of the gold stocks that have not done well, mainly on the back of the weaker gold price. We've seen gold price falling by around 3%, perhaps because that safe haven buying has kind of weighed down as investors feel like, well, they can go out, risk appetite has come back and they are feeling a little bit confident going into all those equities.
Let's focus for a moment, Tshepo, on Nigeria's good news, at least as far as the World Bank is concerned, really giving a positive feedback on the growth rate for Nigeria for the year 2024.
Absolutely. I think we have to look at this number probably from a low base. This is the strongest showing in more than 10 years for the fourth quarter of last year, 2025. And I mean, the IMF, of course, I'm sure, has been quite impressed with the work that the Nigerian Minister of Finance, as well as the central bank there, in terms of some of the structural reforms that they have undertaken. Of course, at a pain to ordinary South Africans. Remember, they had to do away with those fuel subsidies, the electricity allowance. They had to do away with a number of things in order to comply with those IMF restructuring. But it looked like they are, of course, starting to see the benefits of it. Fourth quarter economic growth in Nigeria was up 4.6%. And the growth for this year is expected at around 3.6%. And of course, they will continue to undertake some of those reforms, the main one being the foreign exchange reforms that has actually stabilized the Naira. But there are, of course, risks when you look, into the medium to long term. Inflation remains a major concern for the Nigerian economy, for the cost of living. It's still unaffordable for ordinary people. And that started almost 4 or 5 years ago when the Naira was decimated with its value. And it's going to take a long time for that currency to actually gain some of the ground that it has lost. But there are some silver lining, particularly when you look at economic growth.
And what else do you have on your diary for this week, Thabo?
Well, I think most importantly, tomorrow we are going to look at the unemployment numbers for South Africa. The Statistics South Africa will release the first quarter GDP numbers. Remember, unemployment in South Africa has been stubborn at around 31%. At some point it was 31.9%. Unfortunately, it is expected to remain at those elevated levels. As you know, there hasn't been substantial economic growth in order to unwind that.
And we certainly look forward to those numbers coming out, and we hope to unpack them with you again when we next chat.
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you so much. That's Tshepo Mongayo, SABC Economics Editor, giving us the latest from the world of business, not only for today, but really what this entire week is looking like. Takes us to exactly 4:59 Central African time. Ooh, bonjour. What do you have in store in 30 seconds?
Bonjour à tous les auditeurs, on parlera de la Côte d'Ivoire, on parlera de l'Africa CEO Forum et aussi des Sud-Africains, africanaires qui ont bénéficié du programme de réfugiés aux États-Unis. Merci de rester connectés sur Vue d'Afrique. Merci Thami.
Beautiful. We actually focused on that story as well. We had the President of South Africa speaking at the CEO Forum around Afrixam Bank and the African Continental Free Trade Area. So that's really going to be a great one. So here's Vue d'Afrique coming up in just a moment from myself, Thami Ngubeni, and the team from the business desk. You have yourself a great one. Handing over now to Vue d'Afrique and the French desk.
Vue d'Afrique, un magazine des actualités en français sur Channel Africa. Rendez-vous du lundi au vendredi avec Joël Mouteba sur Channel Africa de 15h à 16h, temps universel. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Bonjour à tous et excellentes conditions à l'écoute de Canal Afrique, la perspective africaine de l'information qui émet depuis nos studios d'Auckland Park de Johannesburg en Afrique du Sud. Je suis Joël Mouteba à la présentation et tout de suite, voici les principaux titres à la une de l'actualité sur Vue d'Afrique. Coup de théâtre en Côte d'Ivoire avec la démission surprise de Tidjane Thiam de la présidence du PDCI-RDA à seulement 5 mois de l'élection présidentielle. Les grands patrons africains entendent forger un nouveau contrat de croissance en Afrique lors de l'édition 2025 de l'Africa CEO Forum qui s'est ouvert ce lundi et ce pour 2 jours à Abidjan en Côte d'Ivoire. Et enfin, pour les grands titres d'aujourd'hui, le premier groupe de 49 Sud-Africains Afrikaner, bénéficiaires du programme de réfugiés controversé lancé par les États-Unis, sont arrivés ce lundi aux États-Unis. Voilà donc pour les grands titres dont les détails vous seront donnés dans la partie magazine après le bulletin d'information de Joël Kabongo. Bonjour Kabongo.
Bonjour Joël.
SABC Actualité. La perspective africaine.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous, bienvenue à cette première édition de la semaine. Le porte-parole du ministère des Relations internationales et de la coopération d'Afrique du Sud, Christian Piri, a rejeté les affirmations selon lesquelles le groupe d'Afrikaners blancs réinstallés aux États-Unis devrait être identifié comme des réfugiés. Le ministère soutient qu'il n'existe aucune base valable pour une telle désignation. La controverse survient alors que le premier groupe d'Afrikaners blancs ayant obtenu le statut de réfugié par l'administration Trump devrait arriver aux États-Unis ce lundi 12 mai. Crispin Firi a souligné que si chaque citoyen a le droit de quitter le pays, son départ ne doit pas être justifié par de faux prétextes. Il a fermement rejeté les allégations selon lesquelles le groupe serait persécuté en Afrique du Sud en raison de sa race ou de sa langue. Piri a